I'm taking my daughter's side after she bit her babysitter. We rushed home from dinner when our babysitter Lisa called screaming that our 9-year-old Henrietta had attacked her like a wild animal. When we burst through the door, Lisa was sitting on our kitchen counter holding blood-soaked paper towels to her forearm, while Henrietta stood in the corner with blood on her mouth and her little fists clenched. The bite mark on Lisa's arm was deep enough that I could see fat tissue beneath the skin, and there were multiple bite wounds running up to her elbow like Henrietta had bitten her over and over. "Your daughter is psychotic," Lisa screamed. "She just attacked me out of nowhere while I was making them dinner. I need to go to the hospital and you're paying for everything." "Henrietta, what happened?" my husband asked, kneeling beside her while I grabbed real bandages for Lisa's arm. Henrietta looked at us with tears streaming down her face. "She's mean to me and Tristan all the time." Lisa rolled her eyes dramatically. "Kids always say that when they don't get their way." I told her no cookies before dinner and she went feral. "You call us stupid," Henrietta said quietly. "You tell us we're annoying and you wish you didn't have to watch us." "That's completely made up," Lisa said, but she wasn't looking at us anymore. "Kids say anything when they're in trouble." My husband and I exchanged glances because Henrietta had mentioned not liking Lisa before, but we'd assumed it was just because Lisa enforced bedtime. "You spit on our food," Henrietta continued. "You eat our special snacks Mom saves for us. You lock us in our rooms when your boyfriend comes over." "Your boyfriend comes here?" I asked, feeling my stomach drop. Lisa's face went red. "I've never had anyone over." "She's lying to get out of trouble." "He was here today," Henrietta said. "You made us go upstairs and said if we came down you'd throw away all our toys." "These are insane accusations from a violent child," Lisa said, pressing the bandages to her arm. "I'm 19 years old and I've been babysitting for 3 years without a single complaint." "Well, I have a complaint," Henrietta shouted. "Tristan was choking," she continued. "He was eating the grapes you didn't cut up even though Mom always cuts them for him." My blood went cold. We'd told Lisa multiple times that Tristan needed his grapes cut into quarters because he'd choked before. "He was choking and turning purple and making these scary sounds," Henrietta continued, tears pouring down her face. "I ran to you and kept pulling on your arm and screaming that Tristan couldn't breathe." "She was being dramatic," Lisa said quickly. "Kids cough when they eat." "You wouldn't look up from your phone," Henrietta screamed. "You kept texting and laughing and saying, 'Shut up, I'm busy,' while Tristan was dying. You pushed me away when I tried to grab your phone." I looked at Tristan, who was still rubbing his throat, and my heart stopped. "Baby, were you choking?" He nodded and whispered hoarsely. "Couldn't breathe. Henny saved me. That's when I bit you," Henrietta said to Lisa. "You wouldn't help him and you pushed me so I bit your arm as hard as I could and you finally looked up and screamed." "She's making this up," Lisa said, but she was backing toward the door now. "Kids stick together when they're in trouble." "You grabbed Tristan and hit his back once and the grape came out," Henrietta said. "Then you grabbed me and shook me and called me the B word." "You called my 9-year-old the B word?" my husband said, his voice dangerously low. "She bit me!" Lisa screamed. "I was bleeding. Look at my arm. This is assault." "You were letting my son choke to death," I said, moving toward her. "He could have died while you were texting." "He's fine," Lisa said, gesturing at Tristan. "Kids are dramatic. He probably wasn't even really choking." I looked at Tristan's neck and could see red marks where something had been lodged. "Get out of my house," my husband said quietly. "I'm pressing charges," Lisa screamed. "Your kid is violent and dangerous. I need medical treatment." "Get out before I show you what violent really looks like," I said, stepping between her and my children. Lisa grabbed her purse, still holding the bandages to her arm. "You'll be hearing from my parents and the police. That little monster belongs in therapy." "That little monster saved her brother's life," my husband said, "because you were too busy on your phone to notice a 4-year-old choking." "He wasn't really choking," Lisa insisted. "This is all being blown out of proportion." Just as I was about to physically throw her out of my house, Tristan made a strange sound from the couch and collapsed onto the floor. My knees hit the floor hard as I scrambled toward my baby boy who was lying completely still with his lips already turning this awful blue color. My husband shoved Lisa out of the way so hard she stumbled into the wall, and we both started doing the stuff we'd learned in that CPR class years ago. Henrietta pressed herself against the corner crying, while I tilted Tristan's little head back to check if anything was blocking his airway. His mouth was open but nothing was coming out, and his chest wasn't moving at all. My husband flipped him over and started hitting his back between his shoulder blades while I grabbed my phone with shaking hands to call 911. The dispatcher picked up right away, and her calm voice started telling us what to do, even though I was screaming that my 4-year-old was choking. She told us to keep doing the back blows but harder, and my husband was hitting Tristan's back. So hard I was scared he'd break something. Lisa just stood frozen by the door with her mouth open like she finally figured out this was real. The dispatcher said if the back blows weren't working, we needed to try chest thrusts instead. My husband turned Tristan over and followed every single thing she said while I held our son's head steady. After the third push on his chest, Tristan made this horrible gasping sound, but nothing came out of his mouth. I could hear sirens getting closer and ran to unlock the front door and wave my arms at the street. Lisa tried to slip past me, but my husband grabbed her arm without stopping the chest pushes. The ambulance screeched to a stop, and this paramedic named Vikram rushed in with his partner carrying all this equipment. He took over from my husband right away and stuck this suction thing down Tristan's throat. I watched him pull out a piece of grape skin and then put an oxygen mask on my baby's face. Tristan's eyes opened just a tiny bit, and he made these weak crying sounds that were the best thing I'd ever heard. Lisa tried to leave again, but my husband pulled out his phone and took pictures of her bloody arm. He told her she wasn't going anywhere until the police got here since she almost let our son die. She started crying and called her parents saying we were holding her hostage. Vikram said Tristan needed to go to the hospital right away to check his airway. I climbed into the back of the ambulance while my husband stayed with Henrietta, and to deal with Lisa. The ambulance doors slammed shut and we took off with the sirens blaring while Vikram kept using that suction thing on Tristan's throat. During the ride, this huge wave of guilt hit me for hiring Lisa, even though Henrietta had told us she didn't like her. But then I realized that Henrietta biting Lisa was probably the only thing that saved Tristan's life when nothing else would make her pay attention. My daughter wasn't a monster at all, but a hero who did what she had to do. The ambulance pulled up to the emergency room and they rushed us inside where this doctor named Evelyn Whitfield took over. She started ordering all these tests and x-rays and told me Tristan's airway was really swollen and they needed to check if anything else was stuck. The whole medical team was moving so fast and doing so many things at once. This social worker named Joyce Kang came up and introduced herself all gentle and nice. She explained she had to write down everything that happened for their records. She asked me about how long Lisa had been watching our kids and exactly what happened tonight. I gave her my husband's phone number, so she could get the doorbell video he'd been saving. Joyce wrote everything down in this notebook, and kept asking me specific questions about times and what Lisa had said. She wanted to know if we'd ever had problems with Lisa before, and if the kids had ever complained. I told her about Henrietta not liking Lisa, but how we thought it was just about bedtime rules. Joyce nodded and kept writing while the nurses worked on getting an IV into Tristan's tiny arm. The ER was so bright and loud with machines beeping and people rushing around everywhere. Tristan looked so small on that huge hospital bed with all these wires and tubes connected to him. Dr. Whitfield came back and said they were taking him for the x-ray now to see his throat better. I held his hand as they wheeled him down the hall and he squeezed my fingers just a little bit. Joyce stayed with me and explained that the hospital has to report stuff like this when a babysitter lets a kid get hurt. She said it wasn't about us being in trouble, but about making sure what Lisa did got documented properly. I signed some papers giving them permission to share information with whoever needed it for the investigation. My phone kept buzzing with texts from my husband asking for updates and saying Lisa's parents were on their way to our house. Joyce told me not to worry about that right now and just focus on Tristan getting better. The x-ray tech brought Tristan back and Dr. Whitfield looked at the pictures on her computer screen. She pointed at these dark spots and said there was still swelling that could get worse. They needed to watch him overnight and give him medicine to help the swelling go down. The nurses started rolling in this big machine with a screen attached while Dr. Whitfield explained they needed to look down Tristan's throat with a tiny camera to check for more damage. They put this clear mask over his face that smelled like plastic and told him to count backwards from 10, but he only made it to 7 before his eyes closed. I held his hand even though he couldn't feel it anymore while they stuck this long, thin tube with a light on the end down his throat. Dr. Whitfield kept her eyes on the screen showing the inside of his airway, which looked red and puffy like when you burn your mouth on hot pizza. She pointed at dark spots on the screen and said the swelling could still close up his airway completely if we weren't careful. My phone buzzed with a text from my husband saying Lisa was threatening to sue us for assault and false imprisonment because we wouldn't let her leave right away. I turned my phone to silent and shoved it in my pocket because nothing mattered except watching that screen showing my baby's throat. The medical team kept adjusting the tube and taking pictures while Dr. Whitfield marked spots on a diagram. Just then, I heard Henrietta's voice in the hallway and saw my husband bringing her toward us with tears running down her face. She ran to me saying she was sorry over and over for biting Lisa and asking if Tristan was going to die because of what she did. I pulled her against me and told her she saved her brother's life by doing the only thing that would make Lisa pay attention when nothing else worked. Sometimes breaking rules is the right thing when someone's life is in danger, and she was the bravest big sister in the whole world. Dr. Whitfield suddenly said, "There it is," and used these tiny grabber things to pull out another piece of grape that had been stuck deeper in his throat. She showed me the grape piece in a little metal dish, and then brought up pictures on her computer of Tristan's airway with all these red irritated areas. She said he'd need to stay overnight for observation with steroids to reduce swelling and breathing treatments every few hours to keep his airway open. We weren't out of danger yet because the swelling could still get worse over the next day. Joyce came back with a clipboard full of papers and explained that the hospital has to file reports with Child Protective Services whenever a kid gets hurt because of a babysitter not doing their job. She said this wasn't about investigating us as parents, but about making sure what Lisa did got documented officially. I signed all the consent forms for them to share Tristan's medical records and our statements with whoever needed them for the investigation. About an hour later, this police officer named Glenn Hawkins showed up with a notebook and badge clipped to his belt. He talked to my husband first out in the hallway while I stayed with Tristan, who was starting to wake up groggy from the procedure. Through the door, I could see my husband showing Officer Hawkins something on his phone, and the officer writing stuff down really fast. My husband came back in and said he'd shown the officer our doorbell camera footage from earlier today when Lisa's boyfriend showed up at our house. The timestamp on the video showed this guy arriving at 2:47 p.m. and not leaving until 5:23 p.m., which completely proved Lisa was lying about never having anyone over. Officer Hawkins came in to talk to me next, and I told him everything about how we'd specifically told Lisa multiple times to cut Tristan's grapes because he'd choked before. Joyce pulled me aside while the officer was writing and said we shouldn't contact Lisa directly anymore and should document everything through official channels from now on. She handed me this packet of resources for families dealing with babysitter abuse and suggested we might want to talk to a lawyer just to be safe. We agreed to be careful about everything and keep detailed records of all the medical stuff and any communication about the incident. My phone started buzzing again, and when I looked, there were screenshots from our neighbor showing Lisa's Facebook posts calling us crazy parents with a violent kid who attacked her for no reason. She was posting pictures of her bandaged arm and saying we were refusing to pay her medical bills, even though she was the victim. My husband started taking screenshots of everything she posted for evidence, while I tried to focus on Tristan, who was coughing and whimpering as he woke up more. Dr. Whitfield came back looking worried and said there was another problem we needed to talk about. When kids choke and food gets stuck in their airway, sometimes little pieces can get breathed into their lungs, which causes infection. Tristan needed to start intravenous antibiotics right away, and they'd have to watch him carefully for signs of pneumonia over the next few days. Every single thing she told us made me angrier at Lisa for being on her stupid phone while my son was dying right in front of her. The nurse brought Henrietta into Tristan's room, and I pulled her onto my lap, while my husband stood guard by the door. I grabbed some tissues and wiped the dried blood off her chin while she shook in my arms. Her small hands kept opening and closing into fists, as I explained that what she did was wrong in normal times, but right when someone's life was in danger. She nodded and whispered that she tried everything else first, but Lisa wouldn't listen even when Tristan was turning purple. I showed her the difference between real emergencies like choking and regular problems like wanting a snack before dinner. She understood the difference and promised she'd never bite anyone again unless someone was actually dying. Officer Hawkins knocked and came in with a stuffed bear from the gift shop that he handed to Henrietta before sitting down across from us. He asked her to tell him exactly what happened using words a kid would understand. She hugged the bear tight and described how Lisa pushed her away when she tried to get help for Tristan. She told him about Lisa calling her the B word after the grape came out. Her story stayed the same each time he asked questions from different angles. He wrote everything down and thanked her for being so brave. Joyce came back with paperwork about a parent safety class the hospital offers every Tuesday night. She said taking it would show we're responsible parents who want to learn from this situation. My husband signed us up for next week right away while I held Tristan's hand. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from a mom 3 streets over who said she fired Lisa 6 months ago. Her message said Lisa was always texting when she watched their toddler who fell down the stairs and broke his arm. She wanted us to know Lisa had done this before with other families too. Then Lisa's parents called my husband's phone demanding we pay all of Lisa's medical bills plus extra for her pain and suffering. My husband stayed calm and suggested we all meet with a mediator instead of making threats back and forth. He told them we had evidence of what really happened and hung up when they started yelling. We called the attorney our neighbor recommended, who said we probably wouldn't face any charges since Henrietta was protecting her brother. She told us to keep all our documentation organized and not to talk to Lisa or her family directly anymore. The lawyer said our position was strong with the video evidence and medical records showing Tristan really was choking. Morning came with the nurse checking Tristan's breathing and saying his oxygen levels were getting better. Dr. Whitfield examined him and said the swelling in his throat was going down, and he could probably go home tomorrow if he kept improving. He was still weak and his voice was raspy, but at least he was breathing easier. Officer Hawkins called to update us that Lisa was sticking to her story that Henrietta attacked her for no reason. He said the evidence we gave him proved Lisa was lying, and he was sending everything to the district attorney. The DA would decide if Lisa should be charged with child endangerment for ignoring a choking child. I pulled up the doorbell footage on my phone again and sent it to both Officer Hawkins and Joyce. The video clearly showed Lisa's boyfriend arriving at our house and staying for hours when she was supposed to be watching our kids. Combined with Henrietta's testimony about being locked upstairs and Tristan's medical records, the case against Lisa kept getting stronger. Joyce said having all this evidence would help if Lisa's family tried to sue us or press charges against Henrietta. A woman from the hospital billing department knocked and handed me a folder with cost estimates that made me feel sick. Even with our insurance, the emergency room visit and overnight stay would cost us at least $3,000 in deductibles. The breathing treatments and medications would be another $1,500 on top of that. She said these were just estimates, and the final bill might be even higher depending on what other tests they needed. My husband took the papers and started calling our insurance company to figure out what was covered. I stayed focused on Tristan, who was finally sitting up and drinking apple juice through a straw. The financial stress was crushing, but at least our son was alive thanks to Henrietta's desperate action. Lisa could have killed him with her negligence, and now we were stuck with massive medical bills on top of everything else. The anger burned in my chest, but I pushed it down to deal with the immediate problems in front of us. My husband arrived at the hospital room 20 minutes later with Henrietta holding his hand and looking scared. He pulled me into the hallway while the nurse watched the kids and his face was tight with anger. "Why did we hire her?" he asked, then immediately shook his head. "No, I hired her too." We both ignored Henrietta's complaints. I started to say something defensive but stopped myself because fighting wouldn't help Tristan. We stood there for a moment just breathing, and then he grabbed my hand. "We deal with this together," he said. "No blaming, just fixing." I squeezed his hand back and we walked back into the room as a team. My phone rang and it was the daycare coordinator asking about Tristan's attendance for tomorrow. I explained he was still in the hospital and would need recovery time at home. She started asking about backup care and I realized we hadn't thought about work schedules yet. My husband pulled up his calendar while I talked to her about medical leave paperwork. We'd both need to take time off and figure out who could help with the kids. The coordinator said she'd email the forms and wish Tristan a quick recovery. Joyce knocked on the doorframe and came in with some papers in her hand. She sat down and explained something called restorative justice that could help avoid a long legal fight. Both families would meet with a mediator to work out an agreement, she said. It's faster than court if everyone participates honestly. She showed us a pamphlet about the process and said it focused on taking responsibility and preventing future problems. I told her I'd consider it if Lisa admitted what she did and agreed to real changes. Joyce made notes and said she'd reach out to Lisa's family about the option. Officer Hawkins called my husband's phone with an update from the district attorney's office. My husband put it on speaker, so I could hear too. The DA reviewed everything and won't prosecute Henrietta for the bite, he said. She's 9 and was protecting her brother from immediate danger. He explained that Lisa might face child endangerment charges based on the evidence we provided. The legal system understood that sometimes kids have to act in emergencies when adults fail them. We thanked him, and he said he'd keep us updated as things moved forward. After lunch, the nurse came in to check Tristan's temperature and frowned at the thermometer. He had developed a low fever of 100.2 degrees, and she called Dr. Whitfield immediately. My whole body tensed up watching Tristan's flushed cheeks, and worried this meant something terrible. Dr. Whitfield came quickly and examined him while explaining that minor fevers were common after choking trauma. She ordered another round of antibiotics and said we'd need to stay another night for observation. Every small problem felt huge when we'd almost lost him yesterday. I pulled out my notebook and started writing down everything that had happened in order. Having a clear timeline helped me feel less scattered and more in control of the chaos. I wrote down exact times from the doorbell footage and what Henrietta had told us. I documented when we got home, when the ambulance arrived, and when we got to the hospital. I included every detail about Lisa's behavior and her lies about the boyfriend. Writing it all down made the facts clear, and Lisa's social media posts wouldn't change what really happened. My husband's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number that turned out to be the boyfriend. He claimed he was never at our house and threatened to file harassment charges if we kept mentioning him. My husband didn't even respond with words, just sent back the doorbell footage showing him arriving at 2:47 p.m. The timestamp was clear and his face was visible walking up our front steps. The boyfriend read the message according to the little check mark, but never responded again. My husband forwarded everything to Officer Hawkins, who called back within an hour. He'd identified the boyfriend from the footage and added him to the official report as a witness. His presence violated your childcare agreement, but that's separate from the endangerment, he explained. Still proves Lisa was lying about multiple things. Having the boyfriend confirmed as real made Lisa's other lies easier to prove. Dr. Whitfield stopped by in the evening with good news about discharge planning. If Tristan's fever stayed low and his breathing remained stable, we could go home tomorrow morning. She gave us detailed instructions about watching for warning signs and when to come back immediately. We'd need to keep his food cut small and monitor every meal for the next few weeks. The relief was huge, but I was still scared about taking him home too soon. She understood and said we could call anytime with concerns or questions. The hospital billing person knocked again with more paperwork about insurance coverage. Some of Tristan's emergency treatments needed special approval that hadn't gone through yet. My husband took the stack of forms and started calling the insurance company while I stayed with Tristan. He spent 40 minutes on hold just to talk to someone about the authorization codes. They transferred him 3 times before someone could actually help with the appeal process. The whole system felt designed to make people give up and just pay thousands of dollars. He filled out online forms on his phone while still on hold with another department. Meanwhile, I helped Tristan eat some applesauce and watched his throat for any signs of trouble. The insurance company finally said they'd review the appeal within 5 to 7 business days. My husband's jaw was clenched as he hung up and started researching what treatments were being questioned. The emergency breathing treatments alone were $2,000 without approval, and that was just one item. We'd deal with the money stress later, but right now it felt like insult on top of injury. Lisa's negligence had caused all of this, and we were stuck with massive bills. That night, after we finally got back to our room, I sat on Henrietta's bed while she got ready to sleep. She was still upset about everything and kept asking if Tristan would be okay. I pulled her close and told her that what she did was brave, but biting is still wrong in normal situations. She looked up at me with those big eyes and said she understood the difference between regular problems and real emergencies. Her ability to grasp that at 9 years old made me realize how much she'd grown up in just one day. Joyce stopped by our room the next morning with a folder full of papers about child therapists who work with kids who've been through scary stuff. She pointed out 3 names she really recommended and said they all had openings next week. I called the first one right away and booked Henrietta for Tuesday afternoon. The therapist sounded nice on the phone and said she'd helped lots of kids process things they'd witnessed. My husband's phone dinged with an email while we were eating breakfast in the hospital cafeteria. Lisa's father had sent a formal demand for $5,000 to cover his daughter's medical bills and pain and suffering. His email was full of legal threats and accusations about our violent child. My husband forwarded it straight to our attorney without even responding. I spent the morning typing up a careful response on my laptop, proposing that we meet with a mediator instead of going to court. I offered to pay only the actual copay for Lisa's urgent care visit if she could show receipts. We weren't going to pay thousands for her letting our son almost die. I made it clear our position was reasonable, but we wouldn't be pushed around. Officer Hawkins called that afternoon saying he'd arranged a meeting at the police station for both families to try to work this out. He said everyone had agreed to come and the goal was finding a solution without going to court. My stomach was in knots, but I knew we had to face this. 3 days later, Tristan finally came home with a whole list of new rules we had to follow. Every single thing he ate had to be cut into tiny pieces and someone had to watch him during every meal. We signed up for a CPR class that weekend, and I printed out emergency instructions to stick on the fridge. My husband put the Heimlich maneuver poster in the kitchen, and we practiced on each other. We were never going to be caught unprepared again. The mediation meeting was set for the following Monday at the police station. We arrived early and Joyce was already there setting up the conference room with Officer Hawkins. They explained the ground rules, which basically meant no yelling and sticking to facts. Lisa walked in with her parents 5 minutes later with her arm still wrapped in white bandages. She wouldn't look at us and sat down across the table with her parents on either side of her. Lisa started by talking about how much the bite hurt and how embarrassed she was at the hospital. I nodded and said I understood she was injured but didn't admit we'd done anything wrong. I explained how scared we were watching Tristan turn blue and stop breathing. Her mother shifted in her seat and her father's face got less angry. I pulled out the folder from Dr. Whitfield with all the medical records showing Tristan had actually been choking and needed emergency treatment. The papers showed his oxygen levels had dropped dangerously low and there was swelling in his throat from the grape. This wasn't some made-up story or kids being dramatic. Lisa's parents looked at each other and then at their daughter who was staring at the table. Officer Hawkins played the doorbell footage on his laptop showing the boyfriend arriving and staying for hours. Lisa's face went red and her mother grabbed her hand under the table. Her father cleared his throat and asked to speak with his daughter privately for a minute. They stepped out into the hallway and we could hear quiet arguing through the door. When they came back in, Lisa's father's whole attitude had changed, and he said maybe they'd been too quick to demand money. His wife was looking at Lisa with disappointment all over her face. They whispered back and forth for a few minutes while we all sat there waiting. Finally, Lisa's mother said they were willing to discuss a more reasonable agreement if we could all move forward from this. Joyce pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing down what each side wanted while we all watched her pen move across the paper. Lisa's father said they wanted full medical costs covered plus lost wages from Lisa missing work for her injury. I countered that we'd only pay the urgent care copay since insurance covered the rest, and Lisa's negligence caused the whole situation. My husband pulled out his phone and showed the timestamp on the doorbell video again where the boyfriend arrived at 2:47 p.m. Lisa's mother grabbed Lisa's hand harder and whispered something that made Lisa look down at the table. Officer Hawkins suggested we focus on moving forward, rather than arguing about fault since both families had valid concerns. He wrote on the whiteboard that Lisa needed medical care for the bite, and we needed assurance about childcare safety going forward. Joyce added that any agreement should include removing the social media posts Lisa had made calling Henrietta violent. Lisa's father nodded slowly and said, maybe they could accept just the copay if we agreed not to pursue charges for negligence. I looked at my husband who squeezed my hand under the table and we both nodded. Joyce kept writing terms on her pad while everyone watched in silence. The final agreement took shape with us paying Lisa's urgent care copay of $75 and 1 day of lost wages at $120. Lisa would remove all social media posts within 24 hours and complete an online childcare safety certification course. Both sides would drop any threats of legal action and consider the matter closed. Henrietta had been sitting quietly beside me this whole time, but suddenly spoke up in her small voice. I tried to tell you nicely first, she said to Lisa. I said, please help, Tristan is choking. And you said, shut up. Lisa shifted in her chair and her parents looked at her with surprise on their faces. I pulled on your shirt and you pushed me away, Henrietta continued. I tried to grab your phone and you called me annoying. Her voice got quieter, but everyone leaned in to hear her. Tristan was making these scary sounds and his face was purple and I thought he was going to die. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she spoke. That's when I bit you because I didn't know what else to do to make you look at him. Even Lisa's father looked uncomfortable now, and Lisa herself stared at the table with her face red. I'm sorry I hurt you, but you weren't listening and my brother needed help, Henrietta finished. The room stayed quiet for a long moment before Lisa's mother cleared her throat and said they would accept the terms Joyce had written. Joyce typed up the agreement on her laptop while we all sat there not looking at each other. She printed 2 copies and passed them around for everyone to sign. Officer Hawkins and Joyce both signed as witnesses to make it official. Joyce made copies for everyone and said she'd note in her CPS report that we'd reached a resolution and implemented new safety measures. Officer Hawkins added that since both parties agreed to drop the matter, no criminal charges would be filed from either side. We all stood up and Lisa's family left first without saying goodbye. Officer Hawkins walked us out and said we'd handled things well considering the circumstances. That Saturday morning, our whole family drove to the community center for the CPR and choking response class we'd signed up for. The instructor had different sized mannequins for practicing on babies, children, and adults. Henrietta watched everything carefully and asked if she could practice on the child mannequin. She positioned her hands exactly where the instructor showed and did the compressions with total focus on her face. Tristan sat on my lap watching his sister learn how to save people. The instructor praised Henrietta for her technique and gave her a certificate at the end. We practiced the Heimlich maneuver on each other and learned how to recognize the signs of choking. The instructor said quick action in the first minutes was critical for survival. Henrietta raised her hand and asked what to do if the adult who's supposed to help won't listen. The instructor looked confused but said calling 911 was always an option in emergencies. On the drive home, Henrietta held her certificate and said she wanted to learn more first aid. The following week, Henrietta started seeing a therapist who specialized in helping kids process trauma. She went twice a week after school and slowly started sleeping better. The nightmares about Tristan dying happened less often, and she stopped checking on him multiple times each night. The therapist taught her breathing exercises and ways to ask for help without panicking. After a month, Henrietta could talk about what happened without crying every time. She learned that protecting family was good, but there were better ways to handle emergencies. Her confidence grew as she realized she'd been brave even though she was scared. 2 weeks after the incident, we took Tristan back to see Dr. Whitfield for his follow-up appointment. She listened to his lungs with her stethoscope and had him take deep breaths. His throat looked completely normal now with no swelling or redness. She had him eat some crackers and drink water while she watched his swallowing. "Show Dr. Whitfield how you eat grapes now," I said. Tristan took a grape I'd already cut into quarters and put it in his mouth, chewing slowly before swallowing. Dr. Whitfield smiled and said his recovery was complete with no lasting damage. She reminded us to keep cutting his food small until he was older. 3 days later, I got an email from Lisa with a PDF attachment showing her completed childcare safety certification from an online course. The email just said the certificate was attached, and she understood the seriousness of the situation now. It wasn't an apology, but at least she'd followed through on the agreement. I checked social media and all her posts about us were gone. My neighbor texted that Lisa had removed everything and made her profile private. 3 weeks after that terrible night, our house felt different in good ways. We had emergency numbers posted by every phone and practiced our safety drills every week. Henrietta knew she was brave for saving her brother and didn't blame herself for how she did it. Tristan took smaller bites without being reminded and pointed at the first aid poster when he walked by. My husband and I felt more prepared and aware of what could go wrong. We'd learned that sometimes the worst experiences teach the most important lessons about protecting what matters most. I really appreciate you sticking with me through all the questions and curiosity today. It means a lot to share these moments with you. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.